thank you to the choir and to Brad for the gift of your music. You know, our worship theme this month is sustainability. And I wanted to talk about a sustainable relationship with the news, because at its heart, sustainability just means how long you can keep something up. And so many of you have come to me to say that you don't want to keep up with the current flow of terrible news. Me neither. You know, there are a lot of ways that we can look at how things were different before and after September 11th, 2001. That morning, the two planes struck at 8:46 and 9:03 Eastern Time, and the news stations at that point needed to repeat the same details over and over and over again as more people were finding out the news and tuning in, as more details were coming in over and over and over. At 10:49 a.m., September 11th, 2001, Fox News put up a news ticker at the bottom of the screen to relay that repetitive, frightening information. CNN added a news ticker at the bottom of the screen at 11:11 a.m. MSNBC, 2 o'clock p.m. It never went away. Think about that. 17 years later, we can turn on the TV anytime, 24 hours a day, and the emergency news ticker from September 11th is still going. Now, I'm a strong supporter of good journalism. I've worked in the media, and I believe that a free and independent press is the backbone of a functioning democracy, one of our principles. And it's a vital tool in securing human rights. And I wonder what it has done to us psychologically to have spent 17 years in a state of emergency. Even those of us who don't have televisions or computers now live in a society where nearly everyone else does, where we are the indirect beneficiaries of their hyper-informativity. I worry about the souls of a nation of people who believe that life is so dangerous they need nonstop information and nonstop updates on it to stay alive. That's frightening. According to the American Psychological Association, over half of Americans say that the news is causing them stress. But 1 in 10 Americans checks the news at least hourly. I'm one of them. I wonder if so much access to so much frightening news makes the security and certainty of fascism look like a welcome relief. Graham Davey, a professor emeritus of psychology at Sussex University, says that the way that news is presented and the way we access news has changed significantly in the past 15 to 20 years, and he says these changes have been detrimental to the general mental health. Today's news is often filmed by bystanders in the moment, as opposed to reporters who would arrive after all the action had passed, such that now, more and more, the footage that we see is like actually living through a tragedy. It's like watching a first-person horror movie anywhere in the world, multiple times per day, even when we ourselves here in Eugene, Oregon, are fine. Aren't we fine, more or less, right now? Breaking news. I had 8 baby snails hatch this week, and they are cute as a button, but they can all fit on a button, too. It doesn't make headlines. What makes headlines is people running down the street covered in blood, and we are exposed to this over and over and over. The negativity bias that keeps us watching things that frighten us, even when they're not directly relevant to our lives, gives us an outsized feeling in our gut about how much danger we're in. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up. Davies' research has shown that watching television news can produce sadness and anxiety, which should not be a surprise to most of us. And he says this exacerbates the viewer's own personal worries, even when those worries aren't relevant to the news stories being broadcast. He says this effect is especially pronounced if the news broadcasts emphasize suffering and the emotional components of the story. which they do. The distinction between real journalism and infotainment is especially clear and especially exploitative on television. Now, modern televised media and online media vie for shares of our attention, for shares of our living, waking lives, by playing off of our worst fears and prejudices. 6 o'clock news, what item in your house could kill you and your children? I don't know, in theory, all of them. But how much of my waking life will I dedicate to that fear? Our fears are always founded in some grain of truth. But I've been exposed to far more televised bombings than I have actual bombings in Eugene. To date, none. In February, you may recall that I preached on the theme of good enough, specifically how involved and how informed we have to be to consider ourselves good, socially conscious, justice-minded people. And I talked about how some of us feel that we have a duty to keep watching, to never look away, especially if the terrible news is about injustice. That to look away is a form of privilege, which it is. You know, for people of color, the phenomenon of unarmed black men being shot by the police is not new. This is not new. I have a psychology textbook from 1996, which is over 20 years ago, and it lists one of the primary causes of anxiety for black women in America as fear of their sons being killed by the police. 96. This is not news to the black community. What is new is cell phone footage. And new research suggests that for people of color, frequent exposure to footage of shootings can have severe long-term mental health effects. The combination of daily lived experiences of racism and microaggressions combined with the vicarious trauma of seeing these videos over and over again can create symptoms similar to post-traumatic stress syndrome. It is not clear to me that being repeatedly re-traumatized is a duty of ethical people. When Tarana Burke's Me Too movement caught on in October, it was equal parts empowering and extremely depressing. I was moved by the bravery of the women I saw come forward. I was inspired by this massive show of solidarity, encouraged and hopeful for our future, and was afraid to log into Facebook for weeks, which, in light of recent news, was probably for the best. Meanwhile, it now seems as though our country is governed less by a series of checks and balances than it is by an interlocking series of improbable conspiracies. You can probably think of several that are unfolding right now, maybe not unfolding fast enough. As a grad student at U of O, I teach freshmen argumentative writing, how to make a claim and back it up with reasons. And as anyone I've ever dated can tell you, I consider myself to be something of an expert at this. This past week in class, we've been learning about conspiracy theories. As far as I can tell, I'm sending my students off into a world where they will encounter, on average, like 17 to 25 conspiracy theories per day. My philosophy is that I'm not teaching them so much where to put their commas and quotation marks, who cares? I'm suiting them up for battle in the modern world. And the difficult thing about teaching people how to sort out facts from fiction is that conspiracies are real. They happen, and we have proof of them, like Watergate, or right now. You get a group of people, they want to pull off something immoral or illegal. They form a plot, they do it in secret because they have to. That's how conspiracies form. It's really not all that uncommon. We find out about it when they unravel, and they do. I teach my students that when conspiracies unravel, it's almost always because people aren't good at keeping secrets. Or from another perspective, people are pretty good at telling the truth, despite themselves. And what I've taught them is this, that big conspiracies require a lot of resources, and a lot of power to pull off. You just can't convince that many people to enlist as evil henchmen. And keep it a secret, unless you've got phenomenal resources to shut them up. Once you cross a numerical threshold of like 1,000 people that are required to pull this thing off, that's not a conspiracy, that's a business. You've incorporated. Like, here's your ski mask, here's your grappling hook, here's your standard corporate non-disclosure agreement. HR is going to need that by the end of the day. Like, the forces of evil have really improved and streamlined the onboarding process. So generally, those giant, all-encompassing intelligentsia-style conspiracy theories are not true, whereas alleging a conspiracy theory, just making stuff up, that takes no resources and no power to pull off. You can accomplish that over a cup of coffee or through a series of Twitter bots, if you're Russia. Therefore, mathematically, there are just more unfounded conspiracy theories, more made-up stuff, than there are actual successful conspiracies. Conspiracies are hard to pull off. Gossip is not. But this preponderance of gossip run rampant is eroding the stability of public life in an astounding fashion, in my opinion. And I think it erodes our spiritual health and our faith in one another. Now, these conspiracy theories that are circulating everywhere on social media and modern media all center around some grain of plausibility. And they're all founded on a general climate of distrust that you may have noticed we're in. It is antithetical to the beloved community to allege that everyone is out to get everyone else. I think there are two types of people who allege conspiracy theories, and both are a function of the type of society we're in. One, powerless people. Often powerless, uneducated people who feel that their lives are being controlled from afar, who feel like the whole world is being manipulated by powerful forces, an experience which for them, for powerless people, is by and large true. It really feels that way sometimes. And they're searching for an explanation. They're hyper-vigilant to seeing patterns everywhere, because they have to be to survive. They see patterns where none exist, and it is completely plausible to them that chemtrails are real and that Big Pharma is keeping everyone sick to make money. When New Coke happened in the late 80s to the early 90s, there was a conspiracy theory that it was the corporation trying to hoodwink us all by introducing, when they reverted Coke to the original, that was the actual new recipe, and they were trying to sneak it by us. And at the time, the CEO of Coca-Cola said a brilliant quote, which is, "We're not that smart." And we're not that dumb. And I've remembered that. The other type of person who alleges conspiracy theories is powerful people. Powerful people who benefit from sowing distrust among the rest of us, playing off of our fears and prejudices, playing off our awareness that sometimes conspiracies are in fact real, could always be possible. Sowing distrust, breaking up cooperation is so much easier and more effective than pulling off actual civil and political conspiracies. You know what's easier than rigging an election to erase people's votes? Convincing people that elections are rigged so they don't vote. You know what's easier than faking your own scientific data and getting a bunch of scientists to go along with you? Convincing people that academia and scientists are elitist, leftist propaganda machines controlled by the intelligentsia. All research is suspect and biased, funded by special interests, and you really can't believe anything you read. You know what's easier than dismantling a union from within? Making your new employees watch videos about how unions are nothing but a money-making business, might shut down your workplace, might make it harder for you to work. Do you really want that? And you know what's easier than dismantling the churches that do the good, hard work of opposing injustice and assisting the poor? Convince people that religion is used to control them. It's just a bunch of fairy tales. It's a scam. And lastly, you know what's easier than covering up the news of your wrongdoing? Convincing people that the news cannot be trusted. It's much easier to do bad things and get away with it when the general public believes that the media is not telling the truth or is actively out to deceive them. Years ago, I did an internship at the Courier-Post, South Jersey's premier surviving newspaper. Most of my reporting was for the weekend lifestyle section, like 15 family-friendly places to have fun this weekend. Like the Pennsauken Wildlife Refuge is open, the hawks are out, and the observation deck is awesome. So I'd go to the deck, I'd look at the hawks, I'd interview a 5-year-old on scene. Do you like hawks? And then we'd run the story. And when I think back on my time at the Post, I can't remember, to the best of my recollection, a single reporter who was actively out to get the American public. I know I wasn't. Not with my groundbreaking journalism on dog grooming trends. If there was a conspiracy, I was not involved in it. Of course, the stakes are lower when you're an intern. So I hear. And so here we are, in a situation where we can't turn away from the news. We're riveted, and the news is ever present. The news is relentlessly negative and frightening because it's vying for a share of our attention in order to increase ad revenue or to influence our political opinions. In a situation where our emotional stability is being manipulated by data harvesting companies, and our society increasingly holds that nothing can be trusted, anything could be a conspiracy at any time. I worry about the souls of a nation of people who don't feel that anything can be trusted. And I don't think it's true. Frankly, I don't think things are that bad. They are exactly as bad as they are, and no more. They're not check the news every hour bad. They're also as good as they are. So much good goes unreported because we're living it. And when we're checking the news relentlessly, we're not. What needs to change is not the news, but how we engage with it, how we internalize it as a society, and as religious people. It's up to us to resist cynicism, to fight back against distrust and discord, to resist attempts to divide us with petty suspicions about who can be trusted, and yes, to remain vigilant about actual wrongdoing. Living a religious life is not just about fighting the wrongs of the world. It's also about lifting up what's right and good. We have a duty to ourselves to look out for our spiritual health, to tend to our contentment, to look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. Now for me, that cryptic George Herbert poem reads as a prayer for stability, for centering, for context amid turmoil, listing their requests. God, Spirit of life, come to me, come my way, my truth, my life. A heart that can find joy, a life that can find centering and stability. May it be so by setting those intentions. Faith for me is knowing that this rose will open, whatever the news says. I know my fears will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. Amen. Blessed be.